They were 27 teenagers, bright, restless, and on the edge of adulthood. One last road trip, one last memory before the world changed, but they never made it home. No distress calls, no tire tracks, no bodies, just silence. For 22 years, their disappearance became an urban legend, a whisper shared around campfires and cold dinners, until a lone hiker, lost in the forests of Oregon, stumbled upon a rusted school bus hidden beneath vines and rot. Inside, bones and a sketch, a hand-drawn ritual. This wasn't a crash, it was a message, and the question is no longer how they died, it's why some of them were never meant to be found. You're watching Echoes of Crime, where every story whispers the truth beneath the surface. A rusted school bus sits half-swallowed by the forest, its paint peeled, windows shattered, tires buried in decades of moss and rot. The words Forest Grove High, Class of 1999 are barely visible on its rusting flank. But what was discovered inside would chill even the most seasoned investigators. Human bones, and something far more disturbing, the absence of others. On June 5, 1999, the small town of Forest Grove, Oregon, buzzed with graduation energy. Students laughed, parents cried. Camcorders captured shaky footage of caps, hugs, and last goodbyes. For 27 high school seniors, this wasn't just the end of school, it was the start of freedom. They boarded an old yellow bus for a weekend camping trip deep in the rogue River Siskiyou National Forest. No teachers, no parents, just a substitute bus driver named Harold Griggs, filling in last minute after the usual driver called out sick. No one knew who Griggs really was. He wasn't from the area. His credentials had arrived just a week earlier, but in the excitement, no one asked questions. As the bus pulled away from the curb, students waved, laughed, blasted music from a cassette deck. It was summer '99, the last summer. They didn't know it yet, but none of them would ever come home. Lacey Monroe, class president and the mayor's daughter, stood near the front holding a homemade sign that read Summer '99, No Rules. Her smile was flawless, too flawless perhaps. Behind her, Jard Fields held a handheld camcorder, filming everything for a senior project he'd jokingly called The Blair Witch, but with jokes. He never got to finish it. That evening at exactly 6:41 p.m., Elsie McClure, mother of Rachel, one of the students, received a voicemail, just laughter. Then a voice whispered, "Turn that off." Then silent. No hang-up, just static. At first, no one panicked. It was a foggy night. The roads through the forest were narrow, winding, and unpaved. Everyone assumed the group was just late, but by morning things shifted. No calls came, no updates. One by one, the parents called each other, realizing the same thing. No one had heard from their child. The school bus had vanished. Search and rescue teams swept the area. Helicopters circled. Dogs sniffed out false trails. Rangers combed old roads, abandoned cabins, even riverbeds, but there were no tire marks, no backpacks, no broken twigs. It was as if 27 teenagers and one grown man had been swallowed whole. By the third day, the state widened the search to a 30-mile radius. Still nothing. One weekend, a fisherman found a water-damaged disposable camera near a riverbank. The casing was cracked open. The film inside, gone. And then came the letter, delivered with no return address and no postmark. The parents of one missing student received a piece of paper. 5 words, shaky handwriting. "We made it, please stop looking." At first it sparked hope, but handwriting experts analyzed it. The curves were off. The pressure was inconsistent. It looked similar asterisk to the students, but not quite. Some called it a hoax. Others believed it was something far more sinister. And as rumors spread of cults, rituals, and things best left in the woods, most people chose silence, fearful silence. The case was eventually closed, cold. Labeled unresolved missing persons. But one father, Robert Vasquez, never stopped digging. In a worn, leather-bound journal, he documented every theory, every name, every sleepless night. He wrote once, "I don't think they drove off a cliff. I don't think it was an accident. I think something asterisk took them, something that didn't want them found." He never explained what he meant, and no one ever proved him wrong. 22 years later, the forest finally answered. June 3, 2021, 22 years after the disappearance. Travis Milner, a retired firefighter and avid hiker, ventured deep into the rogue River Siskiyou wilderness. He wasn't searching for anything, just chasing solitude, the kind of quiet that only old forests know how to keep. That morning, the air was thick with moisture, the trees looming like ancient sentinels. Travis strayed off trail, following no map, just instinct. For 3 hours, he wove through thickets, climbing over fallen logs and ducking beneath low-hanging branches. Then he saw it, a flicker of yellow. At first, he thought it was a tarp, maybe a hunter's shelter or forgotten park equipment. But as he pushed through the brush, something solid and metallic emerged, a school bus, tilted slightly, half buried in the earth. Rust had eaten through its sides, ivy curled through broken windows. The forest had done what time always does, it swallowed what didn't belong. Travis froze. The number on the side, though faded, was still just legible, 57. His breath caught, the door was jammed. He wedged it open with a stick and a shoulder, coughing as a wave of stale, moldy air escaped from within. The interior looked like a time capsule and a tomb. Dusty backpacks, split-open binders, a cassette player warped from water damage, jackets slumped over seatbacks. One graduation cap, its blue tassel half-eaten by mildew, rested eerily on the floor. And at the very back, a pile of clothes, and beneath it bone, a human jawbone unmistakable, yellowed by time. Travis staggered back and dialed 911 with shaking hands. Within hours, the site was locked down. Law enforcement, forensic teams, anthropologists, dozens of officials descended on the bus like ants to sugar. For the first time in over 2 decades, the cold case of Forest Grove's missing class was burning again. News vans lined the forest entrance, cameras rolled, and in homes across Oregon, parents who had aged 22 years in silence now sat frozen, staring at the news. For some, it was confirmation. For others, it was reopening a wound that had never truly closed. As investigators combed through the wreckage, they began to find something strange. Some of the items inside were untouched, lying as if they had just been dropped. Others, though, were placed arranged, a folded sweater on one seat, a pair of shoes pointed toward the back, a yearbook open to a specific page, class superlatives. It didn't feel accidental, it felt deliberate. Like someone had curated the scene. Then underneath the driver's seat they found something odd, a mold-covered, waterlogged manila folder. Inside, pencil and charcoal sketches, dozens, scenes of a forest clearing. People in robes standing in circles, fire, masked faces, blank, expressionless. Some of the pages were torn, jagged at the edges like they had been ripped out of a notebook. All signed in the bottom right corner, Emily T. Emily Tran, one of the missing. Her body to this day has never been found. The final sketch was different. It depicted the school bus, #57, surrounded by towering figures, faceless, inhuman. In the driver's seat, a single figure wore a long mask, eyes hollow, smile carved too wide. It wasn't art, it was a warning. Dental records confirmed the worst. Inside the bus were 17 sets of human remains. But 9 students were missing, so were both adult chaperones. The bus hadn't crashed. There was no road wide enough nearby for a vehicle that size. No tire tracks, no debris trail, which meant one terrifying thing. The bus had been placed there, moved, hidden. Why 17? Where were the others? And why was Emily, a girl known for whispering more than speaking, drawing rituals and masked ceremonies long before they were found? The forest had given back only part of the truth, and what remained beneath its canopy was still watching. June 10, 2021. Bend, Oregon Police Department. The sun hadn't yet burned through the morning haze. Inside the small station, the day began like any other, coffee brewing, officers shuffling paperwork, the quiet hum of routine. Then the door creaked open. A man entered, thin, hollow-eyed, wearing a jacket that looked 2 decades out of place. His hair was long, tangled, his cheeks sunken, skin pale and cracked as if sunlight hadn't touched it in years. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, swaying slightly. Then in a voice that barely registered above the static of the old ceiling fan, he said, "I'm Jard Fields, class of '99. Everything stopped. The officer at the front desk stared at him. No movement, no breath, just silence. The name echoed through the room like a forgotten ghost, Jard Fields, one of the 27 students who had vanished in 1999. No body had ever been found, no sighting, no leads. He was a ghost, a memory, a face in a yearbook page no one wanted to look at anymore. And now he was standing there. Sergeant Emily Wells stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, do you have identification?" Jard didn't respond. His eyes twitched toward the corners of the room as if expecting someone or something to emerge from the shadows. "I was never supposed to come back," he muttered. "They're still watching." A chill traced down Wells' spine. "Who's watching, Mr. Fields?" He shook his head slowly as if trying to shake off a weight too heavy to name. I don't know what they are, but they never forgot." Officers moved to take his fingerprints. The moment the scanner beeped, the screen lit up with a hit. Confirmed match, Jard Nathaniel Fields, age 40, missing since June 1999. DNA would follow hours later, but there was no denying it. This wasn't an imposter, this was him. For the first time since he'd walked through the door, Jard lifted his eyes and met Sergeant Wells' gaze. "I told you," he whispered. "I wasn't supposed to come back." Detectives cleared a room and sat him down. He didn't resist, he didn't fight, but he also didn't rest. His hands trembled, his eyes darted, his voice cracked with every other word. He hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks, maybe years. They brought him water. He stared at it like it might be poisoned. "Where have you been?" Wells asked gently. "What happened to your classmates?" Jard leaned forward slowly, his voice barely more than breath. "They didn't die in a crash. They didn't get lost, they were taken." "By who?" He paused, his lips parted as if the words themselves were poison. "They called themselves the Chosen." Wells leaned in. "The Chosen for what?" Jard's voice cracked. "To stay, to surrender. To give themselves to the forest." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in plastic. It was torn from a notebook, stained, faded, a sketch childlike in style but horrifying in meaning. It showed a circle of figures in robes. In the middle, a burning tree. Bound to it was a student in a Letterman jacket, his face blank. "I drew this the night before they made me choose." "Choose what? To stay or disappear?" Jard shivered as if the memory physically hurt. "I stayed, I obeyed. That's the only reason I'm alive." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot, terrified, but they never stopped watching, never forgave me for leaving, and now. He swallowed hard. "Now they know I've told you." The interview ended abruptly. Jard stood. "I can't stay here." "Mr. Fields, please." "I told you too much. They'll come for me. I was never supposed to come back." Before they could stop him, Jard was gone, slipping into the crowd, into the misty Oregon streets, gone again. The police had a living witness, a survivor, but his presence didn't solve the mystery, it deepened it. 2 days after he vanished from the Bend police station, Jard Fields was found sitting alone in a dimly lit interrogation room, this time under protective custody. His clothes were new, but his face was still a war zone of exhaustion. He hadn't slept, he hadn't eaten, he didn't ask for anything. Only one thing brought him to the table, the need to finally tell the truth. "You have to understand," he began, his voice hoarse, like gravel scraped across glass. No one wanted to believe what was happening, not at first. The room was quiet, every investigator lined in. It started the moment the bus broke down. We were maybe 10, 15 miles deep in the forest, no signal, no map. Griggs tried to radio in, but nothing came through, so we waited. We thought someone would come. He paused, swallowed, his hands were trembling, but they came first. He described them as figures stepping out of the trees. Dressed in gray robes, stained, frayed at the edges like they'd been wearing them for years. Faces hidden, voices soft, calm, rehearsed. They called themselves the Chosen. They told us the world outside was dying. That we'd been brought here not by accident, but for purpose. They said the forest chose us, that we were the lucky ones. Jard laughed bitterly. Lucky, that's what they called it. They led the students to a small settlement, tents, wooden cabins, a fire pit surrounded by stones carved with symbols no one recognized. At first it seemed peaceful, too peaceful. They gave us food, let us rest. Said we could stay as long as we needed, but even the food tasted strange, like it was masking something. People started having nightmares, same ones, trees screaming, eyes in the ground, waking up with dirt under your fingernails. By the end of the second night, something had changed. The rules came. They said we couldn't talk about home, couldn't use our real names, couldn't ask questions. Jard's voice dropped to a whisper. They called it cleansing. The students were divided. Some believed it was temporary, some thought it was a test, but then came the disappearances. One by one, classmates vanished. They said the ones who left were being transformed, made pure. But we never saw them again, no goodbyes, just gone. A few students tried to escape. They never made it out, we heard the screams. Jard's face tightened. They made examples of those who resisted. He described a night when the entire group was woken and brought to the fire pit. One of the students, Marcus, the quarterback, was tied to a post, blindfolded, silent. They said he refused to let go of the old world. That he was dangerous, that he would spread decay. No one spoke, no one moved, and then they lit the fire. The next morning there was no body, no ashes, just Marcus's necklace laid on a flat stone. And a drawing crudely sketched in charcoal of the fire, the post, and a tree growing out of a mouth. From that point on, everyone obeyed. Some of us gave in, let go, called ourselves new names, smiled when we were told. Others we just played along, waiting for a chance. Jard looked up, his eyes wide, rimmed with red. But the forest, it doesn't let go of you, it watches, it listens, and if you lie too well. He leaned forward, it thinks you belong to it. Investigators sat frozen. This wasn't just abduction. It wasn't just a cult. It was something older, something ritualistic, something that used obedience as currency and fear as worship. Jard was asked the question they'd been waiting to ask all day. How did you escape? His answer came slowly. I stopped resisting. He explained how over time the others faded. Some lost their names, some forgot their families. And others stopped speaking altogether. I pretended to believe it all. I gave them what they wanted. I followed every rule. And then one night I was told I was ready to serve outside. They called me the remnant. The one who would carry the silence. The next morning he was given food, clothing, and pointed toward the river. He never looked back, but before he left, he stole something from the altar beneath the fire pit, a torn sketchbook. Labeled IT. Emily Tran, Jard's voice shook. She knew, before the bus ever broke down, before the others started to change, Emily knew. She saw it in her dreams. She drew the symbols, the masks, the rituals, but no one listened. She tried to warn us. He clenched his fists. Emily didn't disappear. She was chosen. The room fell into silence. Jard leaned back, breath shallow, pulse racing. They said we were the first, the beginning, but they were preparing for more. What? The lead investigator asked the final question of the day. More what? Jard's eyes darkened. More generations. For hours after Jard Fields left that interrogation room, the air in the precinct remained unnaturally still. Like everyone was waiting for something else, something worse to arrive. Because if what Jard said was true, then the forest hadn't just taken the class of 1999, it had kept them for a purpose. And now it was ready to start again. Jard was moved to a safe house under round-the-clock surveillance, not because he was a suspect, he wasn't. He had passed every polygraph, every psychological exam, every forensic test they could throw at him. But there was something about him that made people uncomfortable, not the way he looked, the way he watched, like he wasn't looking at the present, he was waiting for the past to catch up. 2 weeks after Jard's return, something strange happened. In a town 3 hours south of Forest Grove, a group of high school seniors preparing for their own graduation trip reported an anonymous donation. Tents, flashlights, dry food, fuel tablets, all left outside the school gym. No note, no sponsor, just a box labeled, "For your journey, may the forest bless your passage." At first, teachers thought it was a prank, but when one student mentioned the words reminded her of the class of '99 legend, school officials called the police. Within 48 hours, every item in the box had been traced. None had a manufacturer label, all were handmade, and none existed in any known product database. But the strangest detail. The package was lined with cloth bearing a faded crest, a crude symbol stitched in black thread, a circle of trees, a single eye at the center. Investigators brought the cloth to Jard. The moment he saw it, he backed away. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "They're not hiding anymore." The discovery reignited everything. Local news ran the story under vague headlines, possible copycat of class of 1999 case, but people in Forest Grove knew better. Parents began pulling their kids from school trips, teachers canceled excursions. The memorial at Forest Grove High was vandalized twice, once with paint, once with fire, and through it all, Jard said nothing, until the nightmares started. The agents assigned to him reported the same thing. Jard would wake up screaming, soaked in sweat, talking in his sleep. He spoke of trees bending unnaturally, of chanting, of symbols painted in blood. One night he carved something into the wall of his safe house with a broken piece of mirror. The forest doesn't forget, it waits. That same week, a group of hikers went missing near the original search site. 3 friends, all in their 20s. Their last known location was a marked trail, safe, well used, but their GPS trackers all died at once. The rescue team found their tent 3 days later, empty. Inside were 3 sleeping bags, a burned-out campfire, and a sheet of parchment pinned to a tree with a wooden stake. No blood, no struggle, just 5 words, "We are still here, watching." The handwriting was eerily familiar. Analysts compared it to the old note from 1999, the one mailed to the Callahans saying, "We made it. Please stop looking." The pressure, the angles, the looping S's, it was identical, but here's the problem. That handwriting wasn't Jard's, and it wasn't any of the missing students. It was a match to something else. A page pulled from Emily Tran's sketchbook. So who was writing these notes? Was Emily still alive? Was someone else carrying out her visions, or worse? Were those visions never hers to begin with? The deeper authorities dug, the more they found. An abandoned barn 10 miles from the bus site, filled with carvings of the same symbol, the circle of trees, the eye in the center. A journal written in a mix of English and a language no linguist could identify. And a map hand-drawn showing not 1 but 5 separate locations across Oregon, each marked with the same phrase, "New Roots." The cult hadn't died, it had grown. At the next debriefing, Jard stared at the map in silence. Then, pointing to one of the sites in the far north, he spoke just 4 words, "That's where she is." Who? Jard didn't look up. Emily. Her name was whispered like a ghost. Emily Tran, the quiet girl, the artist, the observer. She wasn't supposed to be important. She wasn't the class president or the athlete or the loud one with the camera. She was just there, sitting in the back of every classroom, sketching, always sketching. But now, 22 years after the class of 1999 vanished, her name had become the center of everything, and Jard Fields believed she was still alive. Emily knew, he said, eyes locked on the crude map found in the abandoned barn. Before the bus broke down, before the rituals, before they even came for us, she was already drawing it. He paused, voice low, words thick with dread. She dreamed it. Investigators didn't know whether to believe him. But the map showed 5 locations across Oregon, marked only with the phrase "new routes." Jard pointed to the northernmost dot, deep in the Tillamook State Forest. That's where she is. If she's alive, that's where they would keep her. The team didn't waste time. Within 72 hours, a task force of search and rescue experts, wilderness rangers, and tactical support entered the area Jard had marked. The region was dense, wet, and eerily silent. Birds didn't sing, insects didn't buzz. It was as if the forest was listening. Then they found it. Tucked into a slope behind a curtain of vines and decaying trees stood a structure, more a ruin than a home. A cabin, if you could call it that. The walls were built from tree bark and stone, stitched together with rope made from vines. Inside, nothing but a mattress on the floor, a broken lantern, and a book, a sketchbook. It was old, the cover warped from moisture, the pages brittle. But the drawings were unmistakable, eyes in the trees, circles carved into skin, a school bus surrounded by shadowy forms with mouths too wide to smile, and on the very last page a drawing of Emily herself, alone, kneeling. A figure standing behind her, its hand on her shoulder, its face hidden behind the same wooden mask found in Jard's recovered drawings. Beneath it, scrawled in charcoal, "I am not lost, I am becoming." Forensics confirmed it was her sketchbook, her fingerprints, her blood, but no body, no remains, just another message left behind like a breadcrumb or a warning, or both. The public didn't know what to do with the news. Some believed Emily had been brainwashed, made into one of them. Others were convinced she had always been one of them. And a darker theory began to grow online. What if Emily hadn't joined the cult? What if she had created it? Jard refused to answer directly. When pressed, he only said, "She saw things before the rest of us, and she didn't run." Then he whispered something that would haunt the entire investigation. She drew the rituals before they ever happened. The task force continued combing the forest around the cabin. They found ropes tied in ceremonial knots hanging from trees, dried herbs, symbols etched into bark, and buried in a shallow pit outside the cabin, a skeleton, small. Juvenile, not Emily, but a student. One of the missing 9, wrapped around the bones was a strip of cloth, blue and white, a torn fragment from a Forest Grove High varsity soccer jersey. The discovery confirmed 2 things. Some of the missing students had been moved from the original bus site. Someone, maybe Emily, had been living in the forest long after the disappearance. And maybe she still was, but then came the letter. Delivered to a local news station in Portland. No return address, no fingerprints, just 6 words typed on a vintage typewriter. "Stop digging, she is not yours." Attached, a single charcoal sketch. A group of robed figures standing in a circle. In the center, blindfolded, was Jard Fields. When shown the image, Jard didn't flinch. He simply closed the folder, looked up, and said, "Then they know I'm talking." Jard didn't sleep after the letter arrived. He sat in silence, a permanent tremor in his hands, as investigators laid the sketch in front of him, Emily's drawing, the one showing him blindfolded, surrounded by robed figures. He stared at it for hours, said nothing. Then finally, in a voice so low it barely registered, he spoke. This was never about escaping. When pressed, Jard admitted something he hadn't before. He hadn't left the forest alone. There was someone else, a girl quiet like Emily, too frightened to speak for days. She had come to him in the dark, trembling, eyes wide like she had seen too much. Her name was Nina Santos, another student from the class of '99. Jard had assumed she didn't make it, but now he wasn't sure. "They used us," Jard said, "but not all of us were meant to die." He claimed the cult, the chosen, separated the students. Those who resisted were sacrificed. The rest were indoctrinated slowly, worn down, starved of hope and language and memory. Some eventually broke, but others embraced it. They called it the becoming, Jard whispered. To give up who you were to become something older, something true. He believed Emily didn't just survive. She rose, not as a prisoner, not as a victim, but as a leader. It wasn't like she wanted power, Jard continued. It was like the forest chose her, and once it did, the rest of them followed. He described her presence as unnatural, as though she had seen something beyond human comprehension and come back changed. She used to whisper to herself, Not in English, not even in words, just sounds, like the wind through dead trees, and when she started drawing, we stopped sleeping. The others began treating her differently. They called her names seer, vessel, mother. They said she dreamed the forest's will, and when someone went missing, no one questioned it anymore, because Emily had already drawn it. Authorities were skeptical. Even those who believed Jard found this shift hard to swallow. But then came the second sketch. It was mailed directly to the Forest Grove Police Department. No return address, no prints, just a single line scribbled on the envelope, "Tell Jard we remember." The sketch was almost identical to one found in Emily's recovered book, but newer, fresher, unfinished. It depicted a massive tree dead at the top, roots tangled with bones, and beneath it, a single figure kneeling, face hidden. What made it disturbing wasn't what was drawn, it was what was missing. The figure in the sketch was faceless, no eyes, no mouth, just smooth, empty space, as if identity itself had been erased. Jard stared at it for a long time before whispering, "That's what happens when you forget who you are." Meanwhile, investigators returned to the forest with a single mission: to find the remaining 4 new routes locations marked on the original map. At the second site they found a clearing, stones in a circle, ropes hanging from trees, and burned pages from books, school books, half charred, with names written on the inside covers. All names from the class of '99. They found no bodies, but they found signs of recent presence: a makeshift fire pit, boot prints, a thin mattress, a rusted lunchbox filled with dried herbs, wooden trinkets, and teeth, human teeth. Back at the safe house, Jard refused to speak again. He only wrote, over and over, one sentence in jagged handwriting on pages he tore into strips: "She is not alone. She is not alone. She is not alone." When questioned again, Jard's answers came slower, less coherent. He began to refer to Emily in the past tense, then the future, then as if she was watching. "She doesn't need to hide anymore," he mumbled. "They've already started the second circle. The forest never forgets its children. It just waits for them to come back." And then he said something that stopped every agent cold. "You think you're investigating a cult. But what you're actually doing is inviting it in." For weeks after Jard's mental spiral, silence returned, not just in the investigation, but in the forest. The trail went cold, the letters stopped, no more sketches, no more signs. It was as if the Chosen had retreated underground or deeper into the trees, but the stillness wasn't peace, it was something far worse: preparation. Authorities tried to secure the remaining new routes sites. They placed surveillance teams. Wildlife cameras, drones, patrols, but every attempt to monitor those locations failed. Batteries died prematurely. Footage corrupted, cameras turned on their own. Even the thermal sensors, military grade, showed shapes moving that didn't match any known animal profile. At Site 3 near the Santiam River, investigators found something buried beneath a pile of stones: a collection of student IDs, all Forest Grove, all from the class of '99. All previously recovered from the bus site in 2021, but that wasn't possible. Each ID still had moisture trapped inside the plastic, as if they'd just been taken. Someone was relocating the artifacts. Someone was building a new shrine, and then came the whisper, literally. At Site 4, a drone operator reported something chilling. The microphone on the drone's body cam began picking up static, not unusual. But buried within the static was a voice, faint, fragmented. The audio tech ran enhancement. What they heard made the room fall silent. 3 words: "The circle opens." Jard, upon hearing this, said only one thing: "It's begun." He went silent for 48 hours, didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just sat muttering to himself and scratching at his arms until the skin broke. Finally, without prompt, he spoke again. "They're not trying to finish what happened in 1999, he said. "They're starting over. A second circle with new names, new sacrifices." Investigators lined in. How many? Jard stared at the wall. "As many as it takes." Then for the first time, he told them something he had been hiding since day one. There was one student, only one, who had been chosen to survive the first circle and carry its seed into the next generation. A child. Not one of the original 27, someone born in the forest, hidden, raised under the symbol of the eye. Authorities froze. This changed everything. If a child had been born inside the Chosen's commune, then Emily, if still alive, wasn't just a leader. She was a mother. Jard described the child in fractured details. He never saw their face clearly, only heard the whispers. The child walks at night. The child draws with their eyes closed. The child hums what the forest sings. Jard's voice trembled. They don't need a bus anymore. They don't need to wait for students to come to them. Now, they're coming to us. Then came the final, most disturbing revelation. In Jard's private drawings, found inside a locked journal kept under his mattress, investigators discovered sketches of modern children. playgrounds, backyards, school buses, cafeterias. Except in every drawing standing in the background was her, Emily, older, thinner, eyes blacked out, watching. The drawings were recent, some as late as 2 weeks ago. That shouldn't have been possible. Jard hadn't left the safe house. He had no access to television or news, but every child in the drawings was real, local, alive, traceable, which led to one terrifying question: how did Jard know them? When confronted, he wouldn't answer. He simply smiled, soft. Sad, like someone who knew the story had already passed its point of no return. Then he whispered, "The second circle has already been marked." That night he carved a final sentence into the wall with a pen cap before guards could stop him. 5 words: "You think it's over now." They thought the danger lived in the forest. They were wrong. It had followed them home. 3 days after Jard carved, "You think it's over now." Into the safe house wall, a call came in from a small town outside Salem, less than 60 miles from the original Forest Grove site. A school counselor reported something strange. 3 children unrelated from different grades had all drawn nearly identical images during free time: a circle of trees, a tall figure with no face, and a woman, long black hair, eyes like pits, always watching from the edge of the page. Each child said they didn't know who she was. Each child called her the same name: the Tree Lady. At first, the drawings were dismissed as creepy coincidences, imagination, a shared ghost story, until the counselor flipped one page over and found a name scrawled on the back in charcoal: Emily. The school contacted local law enforcement. They contacted the FBI. Within hours, the town became a quiet zone of controlled panic. Agents interviewed the children separately. No contamination. Their stories were fragmented but eerily consistent. "She walks outside my window at night. She hums songs that make me forget. She draws in my dreams, and when I wake up, it's already there." The parents were horrified, but none of them had seen or heard anything unusual, except one, at 2:13 a.m. the following morning. A Ring security camera from a suburban home caught motion. The footage was grainy, the light poor, but investigators enhanced the video and slowed it down frame by frame. For 6 seconds, a figure could be seen standing across the street, barefoot, still watching the house. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. She only stood there until the porch light flicked on, and then she was gone, that home. It belonged to the family of Nina Santos, one of the missing students from the class of '99. The very girl Jard claimed had escaped the forest with him and vanished, but according to her parents, Nina never came home. She never made contact. She was still listed as missing. So what was the connection? Was it Emily? Was it Nina? Or had someone taken their place? Agents revisited Jard, now under medical supervision after a violent breakdown. He was sedated, barely coherent, but when shown the footage from the Ring camera, his body went rigid. Then in a low rasp he whispered, "That's not Emily." "Who is it?" they asked. He didn't answer directly. He only said, "She's what comes next." Later that night, Jard was found curled on the floor of his room. He had scratched a crude circle into the tile using the metal tip of his bed frame. Inside it, 5 tally marks. Underneath, "They've already chosen." 5 children, all local, all under 10 years old, all with the same recurring dreams, all starting to forget details about their lives, names, birthdays, even their parents' faces. Their doctors called it psychological dissociation. A trauma response, but there was one more thing each child shared. A mark, small, faint, just below the left ear. A circle barely more than a scar, except it hadn't been there before, and it wasn't healing. One child, a boy named Ellis, began screaming in the middle of class. He pointed at a tree outside and said, "She's teaching me how to disappear." The school shut down temporarily, but the damage had been done. This wasn't just a local haunting, it was a new ritual, a new generation being prepared, being trained. The second circle wasn't coming, it was already here, and Emily Tran. Whether she was dead, alive, or something entirely other. She wasn't done drawing, not even close. By autumn, the trees had begun to change, but not just in color, in presence. Something had returned to Oregon's forests, not a person. Not a group, not even a cult, but an intention, and now that intention had a voice. In October 2021, a new report surfaced. A woman in Corbett, Oregon, an hour outside Portland, called police to report her 7-year-old daughter Aria had begun speaking in her sleep. Whispering, not nightmares, not mumbling, whispering in a language no one could identify. The mother recorded it and submitted the audio. Experts ran the file through translation software. Nothing matched. But Jard Field, still under psychological watch, heard the audio once and started to cry, not out of fear, but grief. "She's doing it," he said. "She's passing it on." "Who is?" He looked up with vacant eyes. "Emily." Authorities pulled Jard back in for questioning. He was weaker now, thin, pale. The lines around his eyes looked etched in with charcoal, but his voice was calm, like someone who had finally stopped running. He told them the last thing he'd been too afraid to say. There was never a plan to kill us, he said. The bus, the rituals, the disappearances, they were distractions, trials. Trials for what? He looked at the wall. To find her successor. According to Jard, Emily's visions began long before the class of '99 vanished. She had been drawing the woods since age 8, symbols, circles, faceless people. Her mother thought it was just childhood imagination, but her father, the one person who believed in gifts, encouraged it. That man, a former park ranger, assigned to Rogue River Siskiyou. Name, Harold Griggs, the substitute bus driver. The connection was buried, but it was real. Emily hadn't just followed the forest, she was born from it. The plan was never to sacrifice the class of '99, it was to seed them, fragment their identities, break them down. And see who would survive rebirth. Some did, most didn't, but one thrived, and now she was no longer just Emily, she was the voice. She speaks through the marked, Jard whispered. She draws with their hands. She teaches them what to forget and what to become. He pointed to his temple. It's not about belief anymore, it's inheritance. The children marked in 2021, they weren't victims, they were vessels. And the forest was no longer a place, it was a system, a memory, a ritual that moved. A few weeks later, authorities revisited the forest for one final sweep. No cameras, no teams, just one seasoned tracker sent alone. He didn't find a cabin, he didn't find bodies, he didn't find Emily. But at the heart of a clearing, surrounded by burned tree stumps and hanging ropes, he found a spiral of stones. Inside it, 5 handmade dolls. One for each marked child, and underneath, a drawing pressed between 2 rocks. It showed the 5 children standing in a circle facing outward, and in the center her, Emily, eyes black, mouth stitched shut, arms raised. As if she were welcoming something in. That drawing was the last evidence collected. The case was formally closed in December. The media moved on, families didn't, they couldn't, because the truth wasn't just unsolved, it was unseen. Jard Fields died by suicide in early 2022. His final note was found folded in the back of a library copy of A Field Guide to Oregon Trees. It read, "She was never trying to lead us out of the woods. She was trying to make sure we never left." To this day, no bodies were recovered beyond the original 17. Emily Tran remains legally missing. The 5 marked children were moved out of state, their identities sealed, but the parents still hear things, singing from empty rooms, scratches beneath their porches, eyes blinking from the tree line at dusk, and drawings, always drawings. So maybe Emily was never the monster, maybe she was a warning, or maybe she was just the first one willing to listen long enough to understand what the forest wanted, and what it wants is to grow.